Alright guys, so if you're watching on YouTube, welcome back. This will be our second ever video for the Lay and Pipe Production YouTube channel. If you're watching on TikTok, welcome back. You guys watch my stuff all the time, so we'll trim all the shorts down and make a nice little edit out of it. Today we're going to be finishing up our 2-inch combo monster that we started last weekend. As you guys can see, it's still right here in the stands. Haven't done anything to it. We just could not do the stick welding portion because I left my stinger at work. So we're going to be hammering on this today about 85 amps. And the reason I say that is because typically after I do my TIG portion, I would swap straight over and start stick welding on this. So it's already hot. You don't need 90 amps like I would normally run a 332 718 at. So I'll run 85. That way I don't have to stop, let it cool down. It gives yourself a little bit more tolerance with mistakes. If you mess up or something, you can take your time, move a little bit slower than you normally would, and make that cap look a little bit better. So I'm not going to promise you guys anything extraordinary because I have not stick welded a piece of pipe in probably 2 years. I've taken 1 or 2 tests in that time span, and that was all the stick welding I've done. So we may lay a slick one down. We may throw some shit down. We're going to find out together. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is it is 19 degrees here in Kentucky today. So I've come out here early and started the heat in the garage, started the weld machine. I've left it on high idle for a few minutes to go ahead and get it all warmed up. I can already tell it sounds a lot better right now than it did when I started. But with that in mind, if you're taking a weld test or welding any pipe at all on a diesel or gas driven weld machine, leave it on high idle while you're welding. If you're not welding, run over and switch it back down. But if you're actively welding on it, leave it on high idle. That's going to greatly reduce the chance of you sticking a rod every time you go to fire up and throwing arc marks when you go to break that rod off after you stuck it, as well as throwing porosity from you sticking that rod while it's not in an actual molten puddle, and that slag doesn't have a chance to do its job because it's not hot yet. So would you rather run another gallon of company gas out, or would you rather bust a weld test because you're trying to be generous and save a little bit of fuel? So even with that being my personal machine, if I'm welding with it actively, I'll leave it on high idle, and I would strongly suggest that. All right, guys, so I know I told y'all I don't normally take my test with the top leaning back towards me. I usually take it the other direction, but given the way that my table is set up to get any type of video quality, I think we're going to be better off to weld it this way. So this is also going to be a first for me. But we're going to weld it like this because I think I can get you guys better arc shots and better angles with the way that my garage is set up. Right now, my camera is like 3 inches from my little project truck, and I don't really have enough room to move in here. So hopefully we'll get it timed and get it backed out of the garage and open up a whole truckload of space in here. But for now, we're going to do that. The first pointer I want to show you guys, it does not take a full stick rod, even if you're weaving, to get from the bottom of a piece of 2-inch pipe to the top. So one thing I always do, you've got that leverage, if you got that whole rod in there, your shake, your natural little bit of body shake is magnified over that length of that rod. So what I usually do is I'll come down about 1/3 of the way down that rod, and as you can see, the flux already just popped off of it. Give her a little spin, bend it around your handle, and then I'll roll it to make sure all that flux falls out of there and you've got a good connection. And I'll roll the back of that rod up against my handle like that, and then I'll hold that. So I'm not shaking near as much. And that's all the rod you need to get from the bottom to the top. So we're going to turn this darkness down or brightness down. All right. So I hope you guys can see that bevel pretty clear. We're going to go ahead and take this rod we just bent, fire up on that bottom, and the only pass I'm really going to weave on this with a stick rod is probably going to be my first one. After that, I'm going to run stringers the rest of the way out. Now keep in mind, as I'm coming around this, I'm constantly changing the angle of my wrist so that when I come around, I'm comfortable. I'm not changing my rod angle as much as I am just rolling my wrist. I'm coming across my hot pass and sitting on the top, sitting on the bottom, sitting on top, sitting on bottom. Putting a nice little weave in there. And we'll snap out just like that. Now, my bottom, I won't start dead on the center. I'll offset. And then that way not all my starts are in a straight line. Same thing on top. I'll also offset where I pull out. All right, so here we go. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and bend that rod a little short. Roll it around. Make sure there's no flux in between those teeth and that rod so your rod doesn't arc off at your stinger. And then we're going to fire up and take off. And there we go. We've got our first stringer on. Take our handy dandy file right here. Chip that off, and as you can see, we got our heat set a lot closer to where we want it now. We're actually getting some tie in like we should. Slag's chipping off pretty easy. Now we'll run a stringer around that backside, bring it up to where we stopped, come back over here, and then we'll start stacking stringers up and fill this all the way out. Same process until we get just a hair below flush. On a stick test, you want to stop and leave yourself a little bit below flush so you can follow that bottom line up to go ahead and get a consistent cap on. So let's go ahead and fill this thing out. All right, guys, so there is our first set of fill passes with stringers. So that is our second set of fill passes with a stick rod and our first set with stringers. And as you can see by that first weave we put on our stick rod, I haven't welded with a stick rod in probably a year and a half, 2 years. So as you can see now, we're kind of getting the hang of it a little bit more. As we bring this out before we get to a cap, I'm more or less brushing up a little bit too. So by the time we get to the cap, we've got 2 or 3 more sets of fill passes to put on here. We should be ready to throw a pretty decent looking cap on it. So hang with us, and we'll get this thing filled back out. All we're doing right now, firing up on the bottom, off to the side of the center by about a 1/2 inch, and bring this rod all the way up, trying to maintain an angle. Imagine in your mind that your rod is pointed straight towards the center of this piece of pipe. As you come up, you want to roll your wrist in order to keep that angle straight with the center of that piece of pipe all the way up to the best of your ability. Well, as you guys can see right here, we're just filling it out. I'm not videoing all my fill passes just to save a little bit of length of video. Nobody wants to watch an hour-long video of me fill passing all this. But all I'm doing is starting at the bottom, rolling my wrist up at the same angle, like I said, until I get to the top, stopping right here, and then on the next pass, I'll come up slightly past it and stop. And then the next one, I'll come up slightly past it and stop, and I'll continue to do that so that all my stops are diagonal, as well as my starts on the bottom will be diagonal. We're going to put one more set of fill passes on this, and then we'll do a video on how I cap them. All right, so as you guys can see, we've got our last set of fill passes on here. I already bumped the bottom where you're usually a little heavier on the bottom where all your starts are. You've got that little like knot where your rod first fires up. It's not really fanning out like it's supposed to. I bumped it down a little bit so that it can blend our cap a little bit better when we start and stop down there. So we're going to be a little bit more exaggeratory when we start and stop down here this time. We're going to offset a little bit more so we don't have a really heavy spot right down the middle of our weld test on the bottom, which isn't really going to be a problem as long as it passes visual. It's not excessively heavy and there's no porosity in it. So we're going to start at the bottom, bring our bottom pass up, start at the bottom, bring our bottom pass up. We're going to put a real thick pass on the bottom, and then we're going to see what we need to do off of that to try to make the whole cap look consistent. Because as you can see, some spots are a little bit lower than the others, so we're going to slow down a little bit in those areas. And then some areas that are over flush of hair, we'll speed up in those areas, but try to maintain the same width on our stringer so that it all looks consistent, but you still fill it in the same amount. So first thing we're going to do, I got this super aggressive wire wheel right here. I usually like to use a battery power grinder if I'm using a wire wheel, just because it will like slick that base material off and makes it look really weird, especially on your cap. I always try to hand brush or wire wheel my caps with a 4-inch. You can see when I wire wheel this how aggressive this 6-inch is. But I always like to wire wheel my test before I cap them with stick rod. And of course, I would never, ever recommend using a wire wheel with no glasses. I just don't have any safety glasses in here today. They're at work. So we're going to fire up on the bottom, and we're going to try to put our rod. You guys can see this hard edge right there. When you're doing a stick cap, you want to leave that hard edge on there if at all possible. So when I run my first stringer, I'm going to put my stick rod right in the middle of that edge right there so my cap overlaps a hair on both sides. It's going to touch my fill pass and overhang my bevel and completely consume that bevel right there. So I'm going to run a nice slow bead up right there and then start stacking them up. See however many we need to get on there. Probably 4 or 5 is what I usually put on Monster. About 85 amps. All right. And as you guys can see, there's our first pass. And I want to go a little heavy on it, like I said, because that's what we're going to start stacking on. So I just feel like it blends a little bit better. We'll clean all that slag off of there and do the other side. Now I've got a table here to prop up on. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a full-length rod on the cap just to make sure now we got a little bit more radius around there now we put some fill pass in there so I don't clamp them down here. But I'm going to put my finger down here and use that to steady myself until I get up here about a quarter of the way. And I'm just going to keep jumping my hand up this vise and slide my hand down this rod as this rod gets shorter to maintain as much control as I can. My hood, the light coming in my hood keeps shutting on and off. Uh-oh. Typically on a test, when I stick a rod, I'll just go ahead and bend it. I'll throw the whole thing away. Now you guys see when I done that first pass, I didn't do that because I bought these rods, but just depends on how I'm feeling, I guess. All right. And now we just keep doing that all the way to the top. our weld test is done. I'm going to give you guys a little piece of advice. I usually put a file on the top of my pipe, and you can see all them scratch marks on there, and I'll run my file down that piece of pipe to chip that slag off. I see a lot of people roll right out of a slick pipe weld and take a chipping hammer and start beating on it. Well, that weld's still hot. So now it's got all these little peen marks in it where you beat the hell out of it. It makes that weld look really ugly. And I don't file the edges of my stick welds because I think that highlights your mistakes more than if you just left one little spot out of line. So personally, I don't like filing welds. I'm not going to wire wheel this because, as I showed you guys before, that wire wheel I have is very aggressive. It's going to end up making this look really, really bad by the time it's pretty much going to halfway grind the cap off of it. So I'm going to try to find a brush and brush it by hand. I am very, very happy with this test, considering this is only the second stick test that I've put a cap on within the last 2 years. And it's right here in my garage at my house with a setup I'm not used to, a hood that I don't normally use, a lens I don't normally use. I usually use a fixed lens, and a 30-year-old machine that I bought off Facebook Marketplace just to make YouTube videos with. I'm very pleased with this. So we'll brush it up. I'll take some pictures of it, post them in there. If this helped you guys in any way, shape, or form, y'all please subscribe, drop a follow, comment, let me know what you guys might want to see next. And if there's anything that you guys think I can improve on to help build the channel, please leave a comment and let me know what you think I could change. We'll try to make it work. Like I said, I get this project trucked out here, get this place a little more set up for welding. I think we'll make some better videos in the future. But for right now, that is exactly how I would take a weld test if I had to go in and take one right now. I hope this helps somebody. See you guys on the next video.